apparently he has a couple of other books out too, but not particularly about teepees. But in this book, he does give a pretty good. Oh, he's got. Oh, in the back of the book, he's got 4 different books for sale. Maybe someday I'll buy them. What's this one called? Indian Tribes of the Northern Rockies. Wow, it's pretty cool. Anyway, he's got sources of, what you call that, a bibliography, books and articles and special reports and stuff. And it's the one of the things that we don't do, many of us don't do, we fail to do, is we don't do a lot of research. And when people write these books, sometimes they just want to make money, which makes sense too. But so dig back into the sources. So what I try to do is I try to look up the other reference books, the other resource books, and get as many as possible. Right now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books on that I consider that refer to teepees. And now let's cover this question of whether it's spelled T-I-P-I, T-E-P-E-E, or T-E-E-P-E-E. Because there's some 400, 500 YouTube videos about teepees that use some form of the word teepee in them. There's probably 300 that are about actual real teepees that have smoke flaps on top. Now, before I digress again, the Loven book and the Holly book, Linda Holly, are probably the 2 best books for teepee hobbyists or people to get into. These give some really good historical information. Hungry Wolf gives some good historical information, but I find that the wording in these 2 is even better. And this book on the origin of teepees, he refers to these books as his sources, and you can read in his books about, yeah, you got that out of the Loven book. Anyway, the one thing that he got, his name was Johnny Hughes. He's a British guy that did a trip around the West to determine the origin, how teepees evolved in an ecological Darwinian evolutionary framework of thinking. And he cites that a teepee must have, in order to be a real legitimate teepee, it must have smoke flaps and it must slant. It must be an asymmetrical cone or a conic section on the bottom. Not a perfect circle, not a symmetrical cone, but an asymmetrical, with the back facing the winds coming in and the front facing east. Now, the thing is that he didn't do thorough research either. Thing is not all teepees faced east, and not all teepees were asymmetrical. Some were symmetrical, but the majority that we use now are not, and the majority have smoke flaps. Smoke flaps, original smoke flaps might have been 1 flap or just a piece of hide that they put over the hole or something like that, but they did later come into where they made 2 smoke flaps or 2 ears at the top to cover, to close up, to channel the wind so that the smoke coming from the fire going up didn't come back and smoke out the people. It was what do you call that? Ventilation design. In our wood burning stoves, we use what's called a damper in the chimney. It's a circular thing that has a wire through it and a handle where you turn it and slant it to let more air go or more smoke go out or to dampen it down. And then down below you have a damper at the bottom of the stove. Got to put more where my hands are. At the bottom of the stove there might be a little opening that lets air in, and then you turn that damper on the smoke. Oh boy, I'm not using the words correctly, but who cares? At the top, and then you can control how hot your stove gets and how fast everything burns. But some of these books do state, like Hungry Wolf, he does state that really the only thing that distinguishes the teepee from other conical structures is the fact that it has smoke flaps, because we know now that they don't all have, or that conicals didn't have smoke flaps like the lavu, the Polish lavu, or the Scandinavian Lapland lavu, or the goati, or whatever. Anyway, so teepee or teepee? That's the question, huh? Because the argument I see in a lot of the YouTube videos that I've seen, and I watch these YouTube videos like 2 and 3 times, so I don't just skim over them. I'm into very deep research because I love this topic so much. The argument that I often see in the comments below somebody's video is that it's spelled T-I-P-I. That's the Lakota word for it. And you can kind of sense the anger out of that, everything. Well, thing is, teepee wasn't even written down until, I think, around 1827. So it didn't have a spelling per se. The way it was after the missionaries came, and I forget the guy's name, but you can Google this. Yeah, he worked out of where Minneapolis is now. Riggs, I think, was his name. Boy, I can't remember. And he first documented the Dakota language, and he started putting the Siouan language into American or European script to sound out the words so that he could teach other missionaries who could come and save the savage poor people. Sorry, but I don't agree with that. All right, I really don't. So if my bias and attitude shows, hey, oh well, not as bad as our, what you call that, commander-in-chief of creating chaos and catastrophes and all that other kind of stuff. Anyway, so the word teepee wasn't even written down, and as English teachers came along, they spelled it T-E-P-E-E and T-E-E-P-E-E, and sometimes I just put down a T-P when I want to write something about these things. But it's the thing is they weren't even called teepees. They were the Lakota term is actually Tipestola, and that is cited in 2 of these books, Tipestola. But and then there's one of the tribes out there, a Siouan tribe. I can't remember if it's Nakota or Dakota. And I think one of them is called Guan by the Ojibways, and I think that's the Assiniboine. Don't get me right. I'm still working on these differences of the different tribal nations and stuff, but they didn't have a P. They had a B, TB. But after Lewis and Clark, broke open the land that we bought from the French, one of the first groups they ran into, that was the word teepee, and that word was easy because, well, the Crow were run into later, and they call it an ashe, and I don't even want to begin to pronounce how the word for a teepee is pronounced in Cheyenne